This video has the basics on how to create an interactive story framework. Here's the finished product of our basic story here, where we have an introduction, the wolf is coming, what do you build your house out of, and then we get interactive choices here. So the traditional three-pig story would start with the straw, they build their house out of straw, the wolf comes and blows it down, and that doesn't work, so then it goes on to the sticks, and then it goes on to the bricks, and so on. With an interactive story, though, we don't have to follow that format. We give the user the choice, so they can click on any one of these and see what will happen down those paths. And if we click on the bricks, we'll see the happy ending with the pigs there. So that's the finished product, or at least the framework. Of course, yours should be more involved and have a true introduction and sounds and animation and everything else. But here's how to set it up in Flash. Essentially, we have our long timeline here. We have our introduction at the beginning where we see this. And then as we go through the different sections, notice how we have different frame labels to separate them out. So here we have our straw section where we see the straw graphic, and the wolf would come in here and blow the straw house down. Then we have a section for sticks, and the wolf again would come in. And then we have our brick section, and then a happy ending here. So what we do is we have this layer here called labels, and we have these different frame labels that separate out the story into different parts. And essentially the buttons can then bring us to those different labels. So this sticks button can bring us to the stick section, and the bricks button can bring us to the brick section, and so forth. And we have a little bit of extra coding at the end of each section, which you can see here, the little A, that brings us back to the beginning if we've gotten to a dead end. So for example, when we click the sticks button, we see the sticks animation happen, the wolf blows it down, it's an unsuccessful attempt by the pigs, and so we need to get brought back to the beginning to see the choices again. So we have this little action here, which then brings us back to the introduction and dumps us back there. So now that you've seen the overview of what we're going to be creating, let's dive into how to actually do this. First off, you would create a new Flash project and set it up for the ActionScript version and the size that you've been instructed to for the project. And then we would head over and start creating all the different elements or importing the different graphics. So of course, for this three-pig story, I have a couple of graphics that I've imported. For your own project, you would create or import your own graphics. But we'll start with these for now. So the first thing I would do is put together the introduction. So I'd make a layer for, let's say, intro text. And this would be where we're going to have just a little bit of text that says, hey, the wolf is coming. What are you going to build your house out of? So let's get that in there. So, wolf is coming. What do you build your house out of? All right, so this sort of sets it up for the user. This is the question. And then we're going to have our different choices. We also need the wolf. So let's throw in another layer for that. We'll call it wolf. And if we were going to animate the wolf, we would turn him into a symbol. But at least for this demo, I'm not going to animate him. So I can just drag him out as he is. There he is. Cute little guy. Okay, so the wolf is coming. What do you build your house out of? So once we have the main elements of our intro, the next thing we need are the buttons. So let's start by creating a single button here. We're going to call this straw_btn, btn being the shortcut for button. And let's choose the rectangle tool here with a black stroke and maybe a medium gray fill. And we'll draw a little box. There we go. If you want, you can change the thickness of the line over here. Maybe make it a little cartoony. Okay, so this is going to be our box layer. And to start, up is going to be what the button's going to look like normally, and then we need over, down, and hit. So let's right-click and insert keyframe for over, down, and hit. So right-click, insert keyframe, right-click, insert keyframe, and now let's change these a little bit. So up is what the button's going to look like normally. Now we're going to go to the over state, and let's change this fill color to be perhaps a little brighter. Maybe it lights up sort of as we mouse over it. And then the down, let's change the fill color for the down state. Perhaps that's going to be a little bit darker as if it's being pressed down. And then hit is actually invisible, but we can leave it as the same size as everything else. Okay, so now we have our different colors for our box layer. Let's lock that, throw in a new layer above it, call it text. There we go. And now we can just use the text tool, and let's just put our text on here of what it's going to be. So this is the straw button. Let's change the color to something we can see, maybe like blue. There we go. Move that into place. There we go. Okay, so now there is our straw button. We have a box layer which changes with the different states, and we have the text layer, just one keyframe that stretches over the entire thing. Okay, so now we have that one button in the library. We need two others, at least. But we don't need to recreate it. We've already created this one button. There's no need to sort of reinvent the wheel, right? So let's just right-click this and duplicate it. So instead of straw button, this is going to be sticks button. And hit OK. And now notice that we have a straw button and a sticks button. Let's do that one more time. Let's duplicate, and let's call this bricks button. Here we go. Hit OK. So now we actually have three buttons. If you want, you can even create a new folder here. Let's do that for buttons. And maybe drag those in there. We can highlight them with the command key. There we go. Drag it into buttons. OK, now we have three buttons. The only thing is they all say straw on them. So what we need to do, the straw button obviously is okay. We can leave that one alone. But now we need to modify the sticks button and the bricks button just to have the correct text. So let's go into the sticks BTN. We'll just unlock the text layer, use the text tool, and let's change this to sticks. There we go. So now the straw button says straw, and now the sticks button says sticks. And now let's do the same for bricks. So I'm going to double click on that, open it up, use the text tool. There we go, and let's change that to bricks. Okay, so now in the library I actually have three different buttons. I have straw BTN, it says straw, sticks BTN, it says sticks, and bricks says bricks. Perfect. So now back on the main timeline here, we would create a new layer for each of these. So we could do that. Let's add in straw BTN, and we're going to drag out the straw BTN there. There we go, we can line it up a little bit. Okay, lock that, throw in another layer, let's call this sticks BTN. All right, highlight that, drag out our sticks button. Good, and then one more layer for bricks BTN. There we go, highlight that, drag out our bricks button. Okay, so now all three are out. We might want to arrange them a little bit and get them sort of lined up. One of the quick tools that might be useful for you is if you highlight all three of your buttons, you can go to Modify and then Align, and you could choose top or bottom or center, and it will align all three of them like that. And another thing that you could do is actually put one of them on the right side as far as you want it to go, and put one on the left side as far as you want it to go. And you can try this other thing for align and then distribute widths. And what that'll do is it will separate them out so that there's equal space between them. So there's a couple of nice little alignment tools. All right, so there we have it. We have our introduction. The wolf is coming. What do you want to build your house out of? We have three different buttons. If we export this, we'll actually see that they look like buttons, but they won't do anything yet because, of course, we need to make them work. The next thing, though, that I would do is actually expand out the intro section to make it a little bit longer. And we need to think about the layout of all of our other sections as well. So really the next thing that we need here is a labels layer. So let's create a new layer, drag it all the way to the bottom here, and call it labels. This is the layer, this is the real key that brings together our whole project and gives us the separation that we need for the different sections. So on this labels layer, I'm going to click on the very first blank keyframe here, go to the properties panel, and I'm going to give this a frame label here. And this is going to be intro. INTRO. And when I click out, we see that little red flag right there. It means that I've added a frame label to that, and we can see that it's intro there. And let's say the intro is going to be, I don't know, 20 or 25 frames long, so we can go out here. Let me right-click and insert blank keyframe. That'll do two things for me. It'll extend out this existing keyframe all the way out to here, and then it gives me a new blank keyframe, which I can use to make my next frame label. So I have intro section here. The next section that I'm going to want is going to be straw. So let's put in a frame label of straw, and we get the red flag there. Let's create another, or insert another blank keyframe over here. This is going to be sticks. And let's throw in another one over here. Right-click, insert blank. Let's call this bricks. And let's throw one more way out here for ending. And just to give us a little bit of animation space here, let's just throw in one last blank keyframe at the end just to stretch it out. Okay, so all it is, the labels layer, it's just a regular layer, and it just has a few blank keyframes on it, and each one of those blank keyframes has a frame label that we give it in the properties panel. So we have intro, and we have straw, we have sticks, bricks, and ending. So now this framework means that the intro section should exist from frame 1 all the way up to frame 24 here. And so we need to extend out this content. So we could either do it layer by layer. I could right click here and do insert frame, and that will extend this out. But one thing that's even better is we could actually just use the insert blank keyframe option again, because it will extend it and cap it off with a blank keyframe so that it doesn't spill into the next section. So what I can do is move my playhead so that it's lined up with straw here, and then for each layer I can right click and insert blank keyframe. And so again, what that does is it extends this existing keyframe all the way out to frame 24, and then in frame 25 we get a blank keyframe so that it disappears as soon as we get to that blank keyframe. So we're going to do that for all of our intro layers here. We can right click, insert blank keyframe. There we go. So now our intro extends from frame 1 all the way up to frame 24, and as soon as we hit the frame label for straw, the next one, it's blank. So that's where our next section is going to go. So now we can start to lay out our next sections. Let's click at the topmost layer here. Let's throw in a new layer, and let's call this straw. So this is going to be our straw background, and we don't want this straw background to come out at the beginning. Let me find it over here. There's my straw graphic. I don't want it to exist on this first keyframe. I want it to start in the straw section. So using the blank keyframe again, I'm going to move the playhead so that it's lined up perfectly with the straw frame label here. Go up to the straw layer, right click, insert blank keyframe. Don't forget to do that because otherwise your graphic will show up back at the beginning. So now that I have that blank keyframe, now I can drag out my straw graphic, line it up, and there we go. Now, as soon as I get to that straw section, I see the straw background. Now the only problem is, if you look as I'm moving the playhead down, it still exists in the sticks and the bricks and the ending section. And we don't want it there. It should stop. It should basically only exist in this straw section. So again, the blank keyframe is your friend. So let's go to the first frame of the stick section and insert a blank keyframe. And that will cap it off. So now we have what we're looking for. That straw graphic starts here at 25. It exists all the way up to the end of the straw section, but as soon as we get to the stick section, boom, it's gone because we inserted that blank keyframe there. So what we need to do that for all the rest of the sections and insert the background graphics. So we have straw, we'll do sticks. Let's be more specific here. These should be backgrounds. Okay, so sticks background. Again, we go to the first frame of the sticks section, right click, insert blank keyframe, and now drag out the sticks graphic. Put it on there, good. And then cap it off at the end of that section. Right click, insert blank, lock it, move on to the next, which is going to be bricks. So bricks back. Go to the first frame of the brick section, right click, insert blank keyframe, drag out the bricks graphic. There we go. And by the way, these are just JPEGs. I didn't put them into symbols because I'm not going to be tweening them or animating them. But if you are going to have any sort of tween animation or an alpha fade or anything like that, you're going to want to convert these into symbols or drag them into symbols. All right, so now we have our bricks graphic there. And let's just insert a blank keyframe to cap it off. And then finally, the last graphic that we need is the happy pigs at the ending. So this is going to be ending back. And again, right click, insert blank. That's the starting point. We're going to drag out, where is it? There it is, ending. And line that up. And that will extend at the end. Now, once this framework is set up, as you scrub back and forth, we have our intro, we have straw, sticks, bricks, and ending. Of course, you could add as many different layers as you want for each one of those sections. So for example, at the ending, I don't want just the background. I wanted to have some animation in there, so I could throw in another layer here for, let's say, ending text. And that could be where we have a little title that says the end. So I can insert a blank keyframe there. Let's drag out my end graphic. There we go. And of course I could tween it. So let's insert keyframe and let's tween this. We'll just make it pretty large there. There we go. And tween it that way. So you get the idea that in each one of your sections you could have as many different layers as you want. Just keep in mind that they need to start at the appropriate point and then end at the appropriate point as well. Once you have multiple layers, you could also organize them using folders. So you're going to have like a lot of content for the intro, a lot of content for straw. So for example, let's start with the intro section. If I wanted, I could insert a folder here and rename it and call it intro. And then I could drag these layers either one by one or as a bunch, drag them into that folder so that they hang out in that folder. So then when I'm working on the rest of my project later, if I don't want to see the intro stuff, I could just close up that folder so that I don't see it. So it's still there, but it's just sort of hiding, which can make things a little bit easier. So at this point, let's export our project and see what it looks like. Okay, there's our intro. Oh, and we seem to have a problem here. What's happening is the cartoon or the animation is just playing like an animation, like a cartoon. It's starting at the beginning and it's just playing right to the end, and then it loops back around to the beginning. And we never get a chance to click the buttons, and it just doesn't seem to be working properly. And the reason being is that we essentially need a stop action at the beginning so that we get stopped at the intro and we don't go on to the other sections unless we force it to by clicking one of the buttons. So what we want to do is go all the way down to the bottom here. Let's throw in an actions layer. So just create a new layer, call it actions, and now let's add a stop action to our intro sections. So now let's say we have some sort of animation at the beginning. Maybe the wolf slides in from the side. So what we would do is go to the end of the intro section, and that's where our stop action would go. So I'm going to go to the last frame of the intro section, and then on this new actions layer, right-click, insert blank keyframe to give us a home for our action, open up the actions panel, and we need a stop command, which is stop, 2 parentheses, and a semicolon. So with that stop action, basically when we launch the animation, this playhead will start at the beginning, play, 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 and then as soon as it hits that action, it's going to execute it, which says, hey, stop, and it's just going to stop the playhead right there. So let's try that. Save, export. And there we go. So rather than going on to the rest of the animation, we're actually being held at the end of the intro section. Now we get a chance to click these buttons. Of course, if we click them now, they don't work. They don't have any code associated with them, so that's what we need to work on next. So let's go back here. Let's start by working with the straw button. So we can lock all of our existing layers. Let's unlock just the straw button layer. And let's actually move the playhead all the way back to the beginning. Because the way that we're going to add the code, it's going to sort of automatically add the code for us, and we want to make sure that the code goes at the beginning, where we want it to line up with the actual button. So whenever you're adding code to a button, you want to make sure that the playhead is lined up with the keyframe for that button, and then you can highlight on the button and start to work with it. And the first thing we need to do here is with the button is give it an instance name. An instance name is kind of like a frame label. We added the frame labels so that we could communicate with the playhead to go to certain points on the timeline. An instance name is a way that we can talk to a button or a movie clip or some other object with code. And without this, it just won't work. So let's add in a instance name of straw_btn. All right. Typically, I would do all lowercase for instance names and definitely no spaces or characters. All right. So we have undercase for everything. Straw_btn. So that's the instance name of our straw button. Now with this highlighted, we can open up the actions panel and we can either type out the code if we knew it by heart, or an easy way to get the code on there is to use what's called the code snippets panel. So you can either click window and then code snippets, or you can go to this little brackety button in the actions panel and it will give you the code snippets window. All right. And what we can do here is look for pre-made bits of code. So we can go into the ActionScript folder, go into timeline navigation. Notice how there's a whole bunch of different things we can add here, but timeline navigation is what we want right now. We want to talk to the playhead and tell it to go to a certain part of our timeline. So let's open that up. And notice how there's a bunch of different things. Here's a stop at this frame action. So if we wanted to check that out, that's the stop that we typed in before, stop, 2 parentheses, and a semicolon. Click to go to a certain frame and stay there. Click to go to a certain frame and play. And this is what we actually want. Click to go to a frame and play. So we want, when we click this button, the playhead will go to a frame label called straw and then start playing so that we see the animation that happens in that straw section. So let's choose this by double-clicking it, and it adds the code. Where has it added the code? Let's go back to the timeline and look. we still have our actions layer here. This is the stop action that we added, but notice that back here, lined up with our playhead, is now a little a, and this is all of the code that it's added. At the top part here, it just has some directions. It tells you about the code that's been added, and it's commented out with these little special characters so that it doesn't execute that code. But here is the actual code. All right, so we have first up the instance name. So it's going to be communicating with straw btn, which is our button there. And what it's doing is it's adding an event listener, specifically a mouse click listener. So essentially it's going to be listening to the straw btn to see if it gets a mouse click or a tap on a mobile device. And if that happens, it's going to carry out this function. So this function name right here, it's just automatically generated. And then we have to define what that function is. So here it is, function, and then here's the same name, and it's a mouse event. And what is actually going to get carried out is between these two curly braces here. So what we have is a go to and play command, which is very common for timeline navigation. So we have go to and play 5, which means it'll go to frame number 5 and then start playing. It'll tell the playhead to start moving. Well, that's close to what we want, but instead of the 5, what we want is a frame label of straw. So we can actually take out the 5 and put in our own frame number or a frame label. So I would take out the 5 and then in quotes, type in your frame label. All right, so straw is the name of the frame label that we created here. So when we click that button, it's going to bring us to this frame label and then start playing. All right, so let's try this out. Let's save and export. When it first launches, we're being held at the end of the intro section with that stop action. And now if we click the straw button, lo and behold, we're brought to the straw animation and then it plays. The only problem is at this point, when we click the straw button, that's sort of a dead end, like as far as the story goes. So when we click on the straw button, we see the wolf blowing down the straw house, and then it's a dead end, so we should be brought back to this part, to the intro, rather than seeing the sticks and the bricks. So it's like once it got there, it kept going, and we need to fix that. So basically at the end of the straw section, we would see our whole straw animation happening in this section, but at the end of the straw section, we need to get brought back to the intro so that we don't see all this other stuff. This shouldn't happen when we click the straw button. So let's go to the last frame of the straw section, and on our actions layer, let's insert a blank keyframe on the very last frame here. Insert blank keyframe. There we go. So this is the last frame of the straw section before we get to sticks, and we're going to open up the actions panel here, and we need another go to and play command. Now we could either use the code snippets panel here, or we could type it in ourselves. This is go to and stop. We could go to and stop intro, or go to and play intro if we have animation there. So let's put in the frame label of intro, semicolon at the end. There we go. After a while, you just get used to typing these. So go to and play intro. So what that means is that we start at the beginning. Our playhead gets held here. We click the straw button, which brings us to the straw section. It's going to play, play, play. And as soon as it hits this action, which says go to and play intro, it's going to bring us back to the intro section so that we can make another choice, so that we can try one of the other options. So let's try this out. So if we click straw, now what happens is we see the straw section, and then we just get brought right back to the intro. All right, so straw was a dead end. It didn't work out for the pigs. We get brought back here so we can make another choice. So now straw button is all set. That's all set to go. Now we just need to do the same thing for sticks and bricks. So now to make the sticks button work, we lock all of our other layers, unlock the sticks button layer, click on it to highlight it, and we need to give it an instance name so that we can talk to it with code. So sticks_btn, that's the instance name of this button now. And then remember to move your playhead so that it's lined up with the keyframe of the button. The danger here is that if your playhead is somewhere else, like let's say it's over here, then the code will actually get applied here to a new keyframe. And we don't want that, because then what will happen is at the beginning here, if the user clicks the button quickly, it hasn't hit the code yet, so it won't actually work. So we don't want that. So make sure your playhead is lined up with the keyframe for your button. Click on it to highlight it. Now let's use the code snippets panel. So we want click to go to frame and play, same as before. And notice how it's adding it to the same keyframe as before. So here actually is the straw code that we added earlier, and now below it is this new code that it's added for the sticks button. And same thing, we need to change it. So instead of go to and play 5, we want go to and play a frame label of sticks. So don't forget the quotes in there. Let's go back to the timeline, save it and export it. We'll try this out. So if we hit straw, just to make sure that still works, yep, we see straw, it brings us back here. We hit sticks, and yep, there we go. We're onto the sticks section. We do still have that same problem where it keeps going afterwards. So it did bring us to sticks, but then it keeps going afterwards. So let's just fix that. So the same thing as we did before, we're going to go to the end of the stick section, and we're going to insert a blank keyframe there, and then give it a go to and play intro command. Now, once you have it out once, you can actually just copy and paste it too. So this is the same as before. Let's copy it and right click paste frames. There we go. Let's just check it. Yep, that's what we need. Go to and play intro. All right, so that's a little time saver there. All right, so now let's save it, export it. That should work. All right, straw button works, brings us back to the intro. Sticks button works, brings us back to the intro. Good. Last one up, let's just do the bricks. And that will be all 3 buttons. So again, let's bring our playhead back to the beginning. We're going to unlock the bricks button layer, click on it to highlight it, go to the properties panel, give it an instance name of bricks_btn. Now we're going to do click to go to frame and play, and then change this. Instead of the number 5, we want the frame label of bricks. All right, so now we save this, we export it, and we don't actually need that other action at the end because the bricks represents the last choice. All right, straw button works, sticks button works, bricks button brings us to the end, and we see the happy ending of the pigs. All right, so there you have it. We've taken our linear story and we've used the power of the timeline and using frame labels and using actions on the buttons to bring us to those different sections so that we can create an interactive story. Go on to the next tutorial to learn about how to use audio and how to add audio to your project for this interactive story framework.